This week, we're going to check out the iris family. Now, most iris have got a pretty healthy approach to life, you know, large clumps of grassy leaves, but the flowers, oh, they're so exquisite, and you know, they come in all the colours of the rainbow. In fact, did you know that the word iris actually means rainbow? And they are so versatile. You can even have them in flower in the depths of winter, and you can grow them almost anywhere, be it sun or shade, wet or dry, or whatever. The point is, the Iridaceae is a plant family that I love, and I'm sure you will too. This week, Anne finds the rainbow at the bottom of a garden in Nottinghamshire. I show you how to grow your own freesias to perfume the house, discover a plant called a fishing rod, and get rather damp in a very wet garden.
Brian, how long have you been growing irises here?
Best part of 35 years, I'd say.
And have you been breeding them for all that time?
Pretty well all the time. You have to buy in to start with, but from then on you breed because you can produce irises yourself better than you can find in catalogues, as a rule.
Well, you certainly have spectacular results, but for every good iris, how many do you have to throw away?
Well, a good 99%, I'm afraid.
Really?
This is a very good example of what I call a thoroughly bad iris.
It's so beautiful.
Yes, it's lovely. I mean, this is a lovely flower, okay, but that's only half the story. You see, the individual flowers on this stem are never going to open properly. For example, this second flower is much too close to the stem. It must stand out if it's to be seen properly as an individual. Whereas when you come to this bottom bud here, I very much doubt if that will ever open at all, because it's so compressed by the stem on the one hand and the leaf on the other. Prime candidate for the compost heap, I'm afraid.
Ouch. This is such a beautiful, cool coloured flower, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
Wow.
It's lovely. This is a old favourite of mine. It's one of the very first irises I ever named. It's called Annabel Jane, and I named it after my daughter.
How long ago was that?
Too long, longer than I care to remember, about 25 years ago. But it stood the test of time, and wherever it is, it's performed well. I mean, it's now gone all over the world, and everybody seems to like it. So often when you name an iris after a member of your family, or girlfriend, or daughter, or whatever it may be, it turns out that the thing is a pure dog, you know, nothing like what you'd hoped it to be, which is very tough on the breeder, and it's tough on the person it's named after as well. But not so in this case. This has been a huge success, so I'm very happy about it.
What's this one called?
Well, it's a seedling. It hasn't got a name yet. It's only flowered this year for the first time, and I'm very, very pleased with it. It's a nice thing, and it's just the sort of iris I've been aiming at for a long time.
How do you arrive at the iris you're looking for?
Well, it's the result of a long succession of line breeding, where you cross sister seedlings one with another, or alternatively you cross the seedling back to one of its two parents. In that way you keep the development, as it were, within the family, and you explore the full range of the genetic makeup of that particular group.
Sounds a little bit like incest.
I think it's just like incest, yes, but it does seem to produce results. And after all, they do it on the farmyard quite happily. Pigs, I think, being a very good example of it. Yes, so it does work.
No, it must be tremendously exciting when you've got your new irises budding for the first time and you want to see what sort of flowers you've got.
It's brilliant, yes. Up at 4 o'clock in the morning.
Are you really?
Yes.
What's going on here then, Brian?
Well, I'm splitting a clump that's been in the ground for some 3 or 4 years and dividing it. It's sensible to trim them because the wind rock.
Now you've got a strange looking hole
Yes, here. This is on purpose. This is designed to ensure that the top of the rhizome is level with the surrounding soil.
Sure.
So you build a little hillock in the middle of the hole you make and train the roots down the side.
And is this a good time of year to carry this out?
Well,
Straight after
it's
flowering?
one of the times. It's one of the times. I personally don't normally do it at this time of year because the roots are very brittle and it's very, very easy to snap them.
Right.
And if you do that, you obviously set the plant right back. So I normally wait until September time,
Right.
when they're elongated and they're more pliable. And if you do damage them, it isn't so serious.
And what about all this business of facing the rhizome towards the south that you read about in books?
Well, that's a lot of baloney, quite honestly. This iris, I mean, when it develops, it's going to send rhizomes out all around. Some will be facing north, some will be facing south, and east and west and so forth. And they all flower equally well. So it really is no wives' tale, not to be heeded or taken at all seriously. No, you don't worry about that. That's one thing you can't forget about.
So tell me, John, how on earth did you get into all this water gardening then?
We had the wonderful idea that we would grow waterweed for the pet shop trade. Sadly, having got all the ponds installed, filled them up with waterweed, there was then a glut. We couldn't sell them. So having the ponds, it was quite natural to think, well, what about water plants?
Completely different thing from the lifestyle that you used to lead.
Having spent 30 years sitting on sand dunes, I've rather inherited the Islamic idea of what heaven is, and I think they're right. It's a garden.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and talking of heaven, that iris over there is an absolute beauty. Which is it?
That's a sibirica, quite an old variety called Helen Astor.
Who's Helen Astor?
Well, she was quite a famous lady. It's related that she saw Winston Churchill and unkindly informed him that if she was married to him, she'd put poison in his coffee. To which, cherubically, the great Winston smiled with a charming smile and said, "Madam, if I was married to you, I'd drink it."
Oh, very good. Oh, these are lovely, John. What are these?
Oh, these are Iris laevigata, the purple form, Atropurpurea. There are several species of iris that you can safely grow in water. And then over there, we have a pale violet one.
It's lovely.
It is gorgeous. We're very proud of that. It's one of our own, and it's called Violet Garth, named after my wife's grandmother. There's one called Rebecca, who's a single white powdered with blue, and she's called Rebecca after my granddaughter. And then there's a lovely pale blue one called Richard Greany after my grandson.
And what other sorts of iris are there then that you can grow in the water?
There's Iris versicolor, which is from America and is a sort of blue with a yellow signal, and it's got lots of varieties, and in particular perhaps I might mention Rosea, which is a lovely pale pink, and if you want to get pink into your pond, it's very useful. And then the third one that's commonly available is Iris pseudacorus.
Oh, pseudacorus, yeah.
Yes.
Pretty vigorous thing.
It is very vigorous, and it's a bit of a thug, but there are some nice varieties of that as well.
Well, let's go have a look, eh?
Let's go and have a look. It's
Yeah.
over there. This is it, Iris pseudacorus.
Oh, it's a marvellous looking thing.
It is. It's our native yellow flag, but in fact it's far too big and robust for the ordinary garden pond. The way irises grow, the tubers go around eventually in a circle and then they go on top of each other, and you actually need a pneumatic drill to get the damn thing out.
Tough as that.
Oh yes. God designed it for lakes, and that's its best place.
So not recommended for a small garden pond.
No. It seeds itself all over the place as well. But thank goodness there are some very nice and charming varieties of it, and most of them are much less invasive than the parent, and so they are suitable. There are pale white ones, and one that I'm particularly fond of is Iris pseudacorus bastardii, and I like that not only because of its beautiful pale primrose yellow colour, but also because the name has been thought a little bit too strong by the commercial world. And so It's been cleaned up for garden centres. Yes, and they now call it, rather prissily, Iris pseudacorus sulphur queen,
Oh, how nice.
so that those of a gentle disposition needn't be upset.
I mean, this one grown next to it is an absolute cracker. I mean, does that obviously likes the same conditions as the
Yes,
pseudacorus?
that also goes in water. That's Iris robusta, Gerald Darby, which is an Iris versicolor derivative from the States. And it has these wonderful purple stems to the blue and yellow flower.
Yeah, they are exquisite. They're really nice, almost black.
Yes. A lot of people nowadays will buy Iris pseudacorus because it is a native plant, because they want a wildlife pond, and they're doing their bit for conservation. But the fact is that English frogs and newts can't read.
Right.
So even if you do leave the label in, what they're interested in is the foliage.
Of course, yeah.
So perhaps a variety or even a non-English iris would be more suitable for growing in a small pond, and it can still be a wildlife pond even if you've got a foreign iris in it, because the local wildlife doesn't care.
I'll tell you what, see this purple iris here, I mean, it's a wonderful thing, and I mean, I really would like to have a go at, you know, dividing some water iris up and propagating them. I mean, I'd like you to show me how.
Well, there's nothing simpler. I think we probably go there and get a pair of water boots on, don't you?
Yeah, sounds like a good idea.
Right. You have to go in there.
Right. I'm going to divide this up then.
Yes. You simply, with your hand, you can feel back to where the rhizome's been growing out with your hand, and you take off.
In here?
Yes.
Yeah.
You take off a couple of inches behind it. Just cut through.
Right.
And then pull firmly a bit long, and you'll get lots of root.
All right.
And then you can simply cut it back
Uh-huh.
and pot it up.
Uh-huh.
And away it goes.
Well, there's another one, will you?
There's another one.
So it's just, what, a couple inches back from where the leaf starts out of the water?
That's right.
Right, and then you just
Yep.
clean cut.
Yep.
Like a yank.
And then pull it off.
And you just, what, tidied the leaves up after that, and
Yes, and then it's all ready for planting.
And are most water iris the same to propagate like this?
Yes, exactly. The species,
Uh-huh.
of course, you can do with confidence from seed,
Right.
but these won't come true from seed.
Yeah.
And when you get one that's double like that, as this is a flowering stem, it's probably best to leave that together,
Right.
because that's one of the ones that's divided off.
But I'll tell you what, I don't know if I fancy this water so much. I mean, see if you were wanting to grow other iris, some of the drier ones or something like that. I mean, they would obviously be just a case of getting them out of the ground and busting them up that way, yeah?
Yes, that's right.
You're going to get these potted up then?
Yes. Yep.
I'll tell you what,
Absolutely.
my boots are stuck in this mud
Ah.
left behind.
Yeah.
Okay, come on, straight. Give us a hand up. I'll tell you what, John, it's great to be back in dry land.
Oh, I don't know. Half the fun of water gardening is puddling about in the mud.
Oh, I don't know if I agree with that.
You don't know. Here's a lovely blue iris.
Yeah, it's a cracker. Which is it?
It's Iris sibirica, and it's often sold as a water iris. And of course it isn't. Hundreds are sold every year in the garden centres for people to put in their ponds. And it's an awful pity because I don't know how many get drowned.
I see what I mean. It's got this kind of much drier soil. Yeah, it seems
Yes.
fine, doesn't it?
Of course, this is another plant where you can laugh about the name, because the truth of the matter is it doesn't come from Siberia. It comes from Eastern Europe. I like to think that possibly at the turn of the century, an imperially minded British botanist was, in his amazing shorts, was tramping through Hungary from the west to the east, and he met, coming towards him, a Hungarian peasant leading a donkey. On the donkey's back were two baskets full of these lovely blue irises.
Yeah.
And possibly the British botanist said, "Stop there, my good man, you would see. Where did you get those blue flowers?" And respectfully, the peasant, of course, pulled his forelock and pointed mutely behind him to the east. And so with that wonderfully imperial view of geography, the British botanist said, oh, yes, east of here, Siberia, you see. So he called it Iris sibirica, which is awful bad luck on the iris that does come from Siberia. Because the name's been taken, it's had to be called Iris orientalis instead.
Poor Iris orientalis, eh?
Yes.
Oh, God. 365 days a year, you can get hold of a bunch of freesias at any florist's, but how many gardeners actually know how to go about growing them? What you have to do is try and replicate the conditions that freesias grow in the wild. Now, they come from South Africa where they grow in dry, sunny meadows, and it's those kind of conditions you've got to try and replicate in a pot, and this is how you go about it. First of all, you want something like a 5-inch pot, wee bit of depth. Make sure it's clay because that helps to give you the drainage that the roots are going to need. You put some crocks, smashed up bits of terracotta in the bottom, get those down there. And then on top of that, you want to get some compost in that. Any ordinary multi-purpose is going to do. And you want about 2 inches of that in the bottom. Fill it up a bit, yeah, like that. And then with your freesia bulbs, you want to put them around the outside edge. Now, just take off some of the tunic that's on the bulbs, you don't need all of that, and put them around the edge of the pot. That really helps because it improves the drainage around the bulbs because they're grown at the sides. I think 5 will do this. So pop those in there, then a bit more compost on top of that. Just finish it off. And as with most bulbs, you want some grit. The point is that when the necks break and when the green shoots come through the surface, they want to have a bit of dryness around the crown so they don't rot off. Now, the most important thing with freesias is getting the temperature right. If it's any lower than 5 degrees centigrade, then, you know, freesias are naturally susceptible to frost and cold temperatures won't do them any good. And at the other end of it, if it's any higher than 20 degrees centigrade, then all you get is leaf production as opposed to flower production. So anyway, get your bulbs in, give them a water and put them in a semi-shaded spot in a cool conservatory. That'll be ideal. Now, I am told that while 95% of the population can smell freesia flowers, there is a poor 5% that can't. Now, bringing these in and giving them a sniff and a bit of a wiggle, I can certainly smell them, and all I can say is to that 5% that can't smell them, no luck.
What started you collecting iris in the first place?
I won a large ragged bundle in a Red Cross raffle. The man was Sir Cedric Morris. I mean, I didn't know that he was a famous amateur hybridiser of irises, but I knew him as a painter.
Oh, no ordinary raffle then?
No, no ordinary raffle, only I didn't know that at the time.
Would you have preferred to win the whiskey?
Champagne for me, I'm not a whiskey drinker. Yes, I did think it was a strange prize, and I came back, and as I didn't have a proper flower garden, I put them into my vegetable garden in a row and followed instructions as I'd got the right kind of soil, and sure enough, next year, up they came. This is one of Cedric's. Good, strong grower, the Swan.
It's beautiful.
Lovely plant. And this is almost my favourite, Caramel, because it's a marvellous foil, very compatible with almost everything.
Yeah.
And by the time I'd got to this stage and seen these plants, iris fever had set in.
They do so well, don't they?
Yes, the ground's good for them. They're trouble-free, basically.
Do you know how many different varieties you've got?
No, I've got no idea.
How long have you been collecting them for?
Well, I suppose about 25 years.
That's a long time, isn't it?
Well, sometimes you don't acquire very many in a year, and we swap. People swap and exchange things.
This is a beauty.
Yes, lilac mist. Lovely plant.
Lovely name as well.
Lovely name. Unlike lots of the American plants, which are very badly named. Lovely plant over there, but it's called raspberry ripple.
Sounds like an ice cream, doesn't it? Not an iris.
Exactly.
Your garden That's very beautiful, but I keep seeing clues that make me think it's a lot older than it is, like that wall, for instance.
This was the church of the Benedictine Priory that was on this site.
How did you come to be here in the first place? I mean, it is an extraordinary old property, isn't it?
It was cheap,
Yeah.
£10,000 for our cottage in the country. That was the idea.
cottage.
Well, it became apparent it wasn't what we thought it was,
Yeah.
and so consequently I contacted the British Museum, and it had been a Benedictine priory, founded in the 11th century, and they sent us a map, and this was the altar, or the nave through, and the high altar was where the far red poppies are in the distance, where we now have a little seat.
It's really rather romantic, isn't it?
It is really, yes.
This is a superb blue. What's its name?
Summer sky.
Glorious. You can really see the beards, can't you?
You can.
The structure of the
It
flowers
is
is
beautiful.
just exquisite.
Yes. Beautiful plant.
Yeah. Some have excellent colour combinations, don't they? This one in particular.
I particularly like that plant anyway,
Yeah.
but it's another example of something with a very horrid name, Joyride.
It doesn't really do it justice, does it? What would you call it?
Don't know, I'll leave it to you to rename it.
Well, it's a shame there's already one called Caramel because it is that sort of colour, but I think I'd go for Creme Brulee. Will that do?
I'll settle for it.
Now, this one looks like a really good doer. So which one's this? I've never seen it before. I've seen a lot
Tiger's
of
Eye.
irises.
Came from the same nursery I got the others in Kentucky.
Quite unusual to do your shopping in America, really, isn't it?
Well, I just happened to be there working on a film called Huckleberry Finn.
Oh, right. So you bought
So
a few irises
I
while you were
bought a few
there.
irises.
Well, I tell you something. I wouldn't mind a few roots of that.
In many respects, I think a lot of gardeners consider this plant to be one of the most beautiful of all bulbous plants that there are. Now, this is one of the dioramas. It's a species called cooperi, and you sometimes hear them referred to as angel's fishing rods, and you can see why. Look at how these long arching stems are literally cast out from the plant, but it's the way that these pink pendulous bells hang on these thin hair-like stems that I find so attractive. And just look at how they dance and tremble in the wind all at the same time. Oh, lovely. Now, dioramas come from South Africa, where they tend to be found in moist grassland. So make sure that you give them a rich, well-fed soil, but with a bit of drainage in there as well. But whatever you do, you must be careful not to damage the root system. Now, let's say, for example, that you manage to beg a bit from a friend. You must be so careful not to damage those roots, which are literally almost as fragile as icicles. But you know, there are easier ways to propagate dioramas. Why not try it as it's done in its native South Africa and let it seed down wherever it pleases? Just imagine your garden might be invaded by dioramas. Oh, what a dream.